You've probably seen the theory floating around online. It pops up in social media posts, comment sections, and viral videos, usually with some striking but vague images. The claim is bold, and for a lot of people, it's revolutionary. That Russia, the giant empire of the Tsars, was once ruled by black kings. That before the Romanovs, a dynasty of African rulers held power from the Caucasus Mountains to the Black Sea. The story points to a hidden history, a truth that was supposedly erased and whitewashed by European historians. It talks about ancient kingdoms with African roots and shows pre-Soviet photos of noble families with black faces. It's a narrative that challenged everything we think we know about Russia, and honestly, it's tantalizing, it's provocative, and it's captured the imagination of thousands. But is any of it true? The myth. What if I told you the story of black kings ruling Russia is a myth, but the real story is even more incredible? There were no black tsars. The line of Russian monarchs from the Rurikids to the Romanovs was European. Those viral theories, while they come from a real desire for a more inclusive history, just aren't backed up by the records. But dismissing the myth isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. The reality is so much more fascinating. The true story isn't about forgotten kings, but about a real African nobleman who climbed to the highest ranks of the Russian Empire. A man who became a general, a friend of an emperor, and the great-grandfather of Russia's greatest poet. His name was Abram Ganable, and his life is one of the most extraordinary chapters in world history. The boy from a lost kingdom. Our story starts not in the snows of Russia, but under the African sun, around the year 1696. Now, the exact birthplace of Abram Ganable is still debated by historians. For a long time, people thought he was from Ethiopia, but a lot of modern research points towards Central Africa, to a place called the Sultanate of Logone-Berni, on the border of Lake Chad in what is now Cameroon. We know that in a 1742 petition to the Empress of Russia, Ganable himself said he was from a city called Logon, and that his father was a ruling prince. His original name wasn't Abram. He was the son of a local leader, but this couldn't save him from what was coming. Around the age of 7, he was violently kidnapped. Torn from his home, he was taken to Constantinople, the heart of the Ottoman Empire, and forced into the service of Sultan Ahmed III. In the Ottoman court, a young African boy was seen as an exotic status symbol. For most, this would have been the end of the line. A life of servitude completely lost to history. But this kid was different. He was incredibly smart and quick-witted, and those qualities made him stand out. And it was that intelligence that caught the eye of a Russian diplomat who was on a mission for one of the most powerful rulers in the world, Peter the Great. Peter was obsessed with modernizing his empire. He wanted to import the best of everything from Europe: technology, military strategy, and culture. Part of that trend, for better or worse, was having black pages in the court as a symbol of prestige, just like other European kings. Peter's man in Constantinople was told to find a few clever little African slaves. He found the boy. The Russian envoy got him out of the Sultan's palace, and in 1704 began the long journey to Moscow. When the young boy was presented to Peter the Great, the Tsar was immediately impressed. He saw a spark of potential. This wasn't going to be just another page. Peter decided to take the boy into his own household as his godson. In a church in Vilnius in 1705, the boy was baptized into the Russian Orthodox faith. The Tsar himself was his godfather and gave him the name Petrovich, meaning son of Peter. His birth name was Russianized to Abram. This was the beginning of his new life as Abram Petrovich, the godson of the Emperor of all Russia. The making of a Russian nobleman. Peter the Great's plans for his godson were huge. Abram wasn't just hanging around the court. He was a project, a symbol of Peter's new Russia, one built on merit, not just birthright. He travelled everywhere with the Tsar and was given the best education. He turned out to be a genius at math and engineering, two fields Peter desperately needed to modernize his country. In 1717, Peter sent Abram to France to study arts, sciences, and warfare. This was an amazing opportunity. Abram enrolled in a military engineering academy, became fluent in several languages, and soaked up the ideas of the European Enlightenment. He moved in intellectual circles that may have included figures like Voltaire, who is said to have called him the dark star of Russia's Enlightenment. His education wasn't just in the classroom. When war broke out between France and Spain, Abram joined the French army to get real-world combat experience, rising to the rank of captain. It was around this time he started calling himself Gannibal. It's widely believed this was a tribute to the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca, another great African military leader. By 1723, he returned to Russia as one of the most educated men in the empire. He was immediately put to work as a military engineer and a math tutor for the Tsar's elite guard. Gannibal was the living proof of Peter's dream. But then, in 1725, his world fell apart. His protector and adoptive father, Peter the Great, died. Power shifted to a man named Prince Menshikov, who was jealous and suspicious of Gannibal. Almost immediately, Gannibal was stripped of his rank and, in 1727, exiled. For a man who had stood beside an emperor, this was a brutal fall. He was sent to desolate frontier outposts to work on minor engineering projects. It looked like his incredible story was over. He spent 6 long years in exile, but his skills were too valuable to waste. In 1730, he was pardoned. The real comeback, though, happened in 1741, when Peter the Great's daughter Elizabeth became empress. She had grown up with Gannibal at court and respected him. She brought him back from the political graveyard and set the stage for his greatest achievements. The story of Abram Gannibal is a powerful reminder that history is full of surprises, and that incredible people are often hidden in plain sight. We believe in uncovering these forgotten stories. If you're enjoying this journey into a history you weren't taught in school, take a second to subscribe and click the bell icon. Join our community as we keep exploring the stories that time forgot. The general and the governor under Empress Elizabeth, Abram Gannibal's career hit heights that would have been unimaginable for the little boy kidnapped from his home. He was promoted to Major General and became a powerful and respected figure. In 1742, the Empress made him the military governor of Reval, a key port city we now know as Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. He held that powerful job for a decade. And while he was there, Gannibal did something to cement his place in Russian society for good. He formally petitioned the Empress for a noble title and a family coat of arms. He got it. The coat of arms he designed was a bold statement. It featured a huge elephant, a clear nod to his African heritage. Below it was a mysterious word, FVMMO. What does it mean? Nobody knows for sure. Some historians think it's a Latin abbreviation for "Fortune has changed my life entirely." Others, after talking with the Sultan of Gannibal's likely birthplace, suggest it's the word for homeland in the local Kotoko language. Either way, it says a lot about his journey. His rise didn't stop there. By 1756, he was the chief military engineer of the entire Russian army, overseeing huge projects like the completion of the Ladoga Canal, a vital waterway for the new capital, St. Petersburg. Abram Gannibal, the former slave, was now one of the most powerful men in Russia. He retired in 1762 and lived out his days on a grand country estate, complete with hundreds of serfs that Empress Elizabeth had given him. He died in 1781 at the age of 85, having served 3 Russian rulers and risen from slavery to the top of the nobility. A legacy in literature and blood. Gannibal's legacy doesn't stop with his own life. It flows through the blood of his descendants, and most famously through his great-grandson, Alexander Pushkin. Pushkin isn't just a Russian poet, he is the Russian poet. He's basically the Shakespeare of Russia, the father of modern Russian literature, and he was incredibly proud of his African ancestry. In his notes, he often wrote about his African blood and the legacy of his great-grandfather. He even started writing an unfinished novel based on Gannibal's life called The Moor of Peter the Great, locking his ancestors' story into Russian culture forever. For Pushkin, his heritage was a source of pride. He saw a symbol of resilience, nobility, and an untamable spirit in Gannibal. The link between the black general and the national poet is one of the most stunning facts of Russian history. The man who defined the Russian language was the descendant of an African who had been kidnapped and enslaved. But Gannibal's story isn't the only time Africans appear in Russian history. It's just the most famous. In the 20th century, after the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union tried to position itself as a champion against racism. This attracted black intellectuals and workers from the US and other places. Then, in the 1950s and 60s, as African nations won their independence, the Soviet Union offered thousands of scholarships to African students. Many of them started families with Russian women, creating the first large Afro-Russian demographic. Today, it's estimated that there are around 30,000 Afro-Russians. Their experience has been complicated. While the Soviet state officially preached internationalism, Afro-Russians have often faced racism, from being treated as perpetual foreigners to, after the fall of the USSR, facing nationalist violence. It's a complex story of politics, cultural exchange, and the ongoing struggle against prejudice. Conclusion. So let's go back to where we started, the myth of the Black Kings of Russia. The story isn't literally true. There were no black tsars, but the gut feeling behind that myth, the search for a lost black history in a great world empire, led us to something so much better. It led us to the documented, verifiable, and frankly incredible story of Abram Petrovich Ganable, a man who crossed empires, survived slavery, mastered war and engineering, became an emperor's godson, and rose to the absolute peak of the Russian nobility. His story, and the story of the Afro-Russians who came after, proves that black history isn't a separate thing. It's world history. It's woven into the fabric of nations in the most unexpected ways. The truth of Abram Ganable is more powerful than any myth because it's real. We don't have to invent forgotten kings. We just have to remember a real general. It reminds us that history is always more complex, more surprising, and more diverse than the simple versions we're usually told. And sometimes the most amazing stories are the ones that have been hiding in plain sight all along. What do you think is the most remarkable part of Abram Ganable's story? Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to keep digging up the history that's been left out of the textbooks, make sure you've subscribed. Thanks for watching.